the original defence expert, who, it must be said, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, was never called in the original trial, is now saying that in some of the explanations that the expert panel has provided, he believes that they may do more harm than good to Letby's defence and her lawyer's attempt to get a new appeal case heard. So really, he's picking holes in the tactics that Letby's new lawyers are using to try and set her free.
Well, at the start of the programme, I talked about Lucy Letby's lawyers and their hope that alternative explanations for the death of several babies, compiled by what they described as an international expert panel, might be enough to set her free, to reveal that she was the victim of a miscarriage of justice. But at the same time, others regard that claim as irresponsible and trial by TV documentary when a trial already took place in court. Times reporter Tom Witherow joins me to discuss more about this story. Tom, you wrote this morning on the basis of the BBC's documentary work that there are big questions about this international expert panel now being raised even by Letby's original defence expert.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many twists and turns to this story, even after the jury's guilty verdict in those seven murders and 7 attempted murders. And this latest one is that the original defence expert, who, it must be said, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, was never called in the original trial, is now saying that in some of the explanations that the expert panel has provided, he believes that they may do more harm than good to Letby's defence and her lawyer's attempt to get a new appeal case heard. So really, he's picking holes in the tactics that Letby's new lawyers are using to try and set her free.
And maybe that's why the original ones didn't call him. Maybe he has views about some of the deaths which would have cut against their defence in court. Is that the impression that you gained?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to work out exactly, because clearly whatever tactical decision was taken by Letby's lawyers, it must have been the wrong one, because she was found guilty of so many of the crimes that were alleged against her.
Well,
the barrister who represented her is still under legal privilege, so he hasn't been able to explain why no defence expert was called. I think that there's that clearly remains a kind of mystery that we'll never know. And
an obvious conclusion to that mystery is simply that at the end of the day, the evidence is too strong against her for any defence to have succeeded, and that what we are doing is simply having very partial views from one TV documentary or another. One presenting, which ITV did, presenting the international expert panel and all of its credentials. Another, which the BBC has done, questioning the international expert panel, but giving an alternative reason why Lucy Letby might not be guilty. Would we be better not reporting this story at all and just relying on court? Do you, and I suppose is a little bit of an unfair question, but you can answer it as best you can. Do you feel as though you're reporting on something which is, I think, at the end, a reasonable story for readers and listeners to engage with? Or do you think in the end it's so complicated that really only the original court constitutes a reliable verdict?
Well, there are quite a few themes that you pick up on there. I mean, firstly, it's very striking to me as a non-medical person just how you pick several expert neonatologists, clearly leading figures in their field, many from different countries, and they will come up with different explanations for how somebody died. And that's one reason why this defence expert, Dr. Hall, says, I don't know whether Lucy Letby is guilty, whether she did these crimes or not, but in his view, under natural justice, she perhaps shouldn't have been convicted because perhaps the evidence didn't reach the necessary bar. And then in terms of the reporting, I think that there are so many important issues as to how our courts function in this case, both from how expert evidence is treated. There's so much discussion at the moment about juries and whether, there are cost-cutting measures being raised as to whether juries should be removed from some cases. There's questions over whether juries can be trusted to understand highly complex cases of medical negligence or financial fraud, where lay people are not necessarily trained to understand the concepts and the complexities of this type of evidence. And you'll remember from the Letby trial that there was the table of shifts that she was on, which many people from commentators from outside the court saw as potentially an important piece of evidence that could have swayed the jury. Although, of course, we never see their reasons. So I think it's an important case to report on, even though, and this must be balanced against what is obviously upsetting for the parents of the babies who died, and they have said so in as many terms. And they say that the compilation of this panel, Letby's continuing efforts to get an appeal case heard, does continue to upset them and make it more difficult for them to move on from what are extremely, unbelievably sad and tragic events for them.
Well, that was Tom Witherow, who's news reporter at the Times, been reporting on Letby trial and the various arguments about it. And anyone who wants to read that can see a story in this morning's Times.
Morning.
Morning. Hello.
How are you?
Very well. So today I put in now 23 expert reports from 24 experts from across the world, covering 8 separate countries. Those expert reports completely demolished the prosecution's case that was put before the jury. It is now hoped that the CCRC will not take long to look at this evidence and refer it back to the Court of Appeal. This matter needs to be reviewed as a matter of urgency, and these reports show that no crime was committed. That is the conclusion of Professor Xu Li and the international panel that has reviewed everything. And it's clear now, if that's the case, this case needs to be put before the Court of Appeal, and we can't delay any further. As you know, I was instructed afterwards, I was not the defence team at trial. What I do know is that you can't just simply go expert shopping. You can't just go and find another doctor that comes up with a different opinion. That is not what I've done. I've gone to the best in the world.
That's not what the family say you've done, though.
Let me answer your question. I'll come back to you. I'm not going to answer your question. I've gone to the best in the world. I've gone to the people that wrote the book, the people that wrote the papers, the people. This is the biggest review of neonatology in the criminal justice system in this country ever completed, ever done. This blows the case out of the water. Now, we had a second follow-up question. What was that?
So I was going to say, have you seen those defence reports then? And what you're saying is that this evidence is different to what's in those defence reports?
This evidence here, it completely demolishes everything that was called at trial. Completely.
But and the evidence that wasn't called at trial is what I'm talking about.
It completely demolishes. This is a completely fresh and new approach to the whole of the neonatology and medical records that was put before the jury. Completely. So the answer to your question is yes, and this is something bigger and different. What you're trying to get at is, do I have empathy for what's going on?
No, what I'm asking you is...
Well, let me answer that question. Do I have empathy? Of course I have empathy. These families have been through hell and back. I have said if they want to look at these reports, then they can look at them. Because what I'm after is the truth. That's what I'm doing, and that's what these reports are.
They say
and they were able to engage with it. And you know another thing? Because I noticed yesterday you got a statement from the lead officer in the case. If he wants to look at reports, rather than dismiss it to you and the Daily Mail, why doesn't he just simply say, can we see these reports? Not dismiss them out of hand without looking at them. And that's what I'd expect a senior police officer to do.
One more question then.
Of course.
Those families say that there's a due legal process that's followed, and that you could, put this application in, which you've done. But why did you need to hand deliver it? They say you're just full of publicity.
You know, because you ran the blog continuously and your podcast all the way through the trial. When it comes to media, you've been out there at the front of the media list. I know that. And you have with the Daily Mail. And you had one narrative, and you captured that narrative really well, and you did it excellently because you're a brilliant journalist, all right? I'm not criticising you. And you got out there and you done it. The fact is, every miscarriage of justice starts with a wrongful conviction. Every miscarriage of justice has landed up before the Court of Appeal and has been dismissed. but has gone back to the Court of Appeal. This has not happened before. The fresh evidence that we have is huge. And as I say, it blows the prosecution evidence out of the water. It is now up to the Criminal Cases Review Commission to look at it, but I cannot see any reason why they should now not be referring it back to the Court of Appeal.
So why wasn't this evidence brought up in the initial trial?
I wasn't the defence team at the initial trial. I took over after. I took over in September of this year, and this is what I have put together with the international experts and all the expert reports, and now I'm relying upon that to go before the CCRC.
At some